Let's now continue with the rest of our stories. And negotiations are currently underway in Ottawa, Canada for a landmark global plastic treaty aimed at addressing the pressing issue of plastic pollution. With nearly 200 nations endorsing the initiative in March 2022, the treaty seeks to tackle the root causes of plastic pollution, particularly in marine environment, by addressing the entire life cycle of plastics. However, as discussions unfold in Ottawa, which started in April 23 and ends 29th of April, the specifics of the treaty remain uncertain. Divisions among countries are apparent, with some advocating for ambitious, binding measures covering all stages of the plastic life cycle, while others prefer weaker voluntary measures focused on waste management. For more on this, let's welcome Jacob Johnson Atatba, his project manager, Zero Waste Cities, Green Africa Youth Organizations, and he's currently at negotiations and joins us via Zoom. Jacob, thank you so much for your time. Tell us about the outcome of negotiations so far.
Thank you very much, and hello to all your viewers and listeners. Here in Ottawa, we are currently undergoing negotiations, the fourth session of negotiations for the Global Plastics Treaty, and the outcomes so far are a bit promising, but there's still more room for improvement. Before the session, we had the revised zero draft that was put together by the Secretariat, who was mandated by members of the negotiating committee to put together the zero drafts. We're here, and then we've been split into contact groups, two contact groups. That one of them is looking at the core obligations and voluntary measures in order to get to the treaty, and then the other group is looking at the finance mechanism and the means of implementation. So even in these two contact groups, they've been further streamlined down into subgroups who are dealing on specific parts of the revised zero draft. Parts like the scope principles, parts like the primary polymer production, and a lot of other parts. And so far what we've had is that many of the subgroups have come out with two versions of streamlined text. And so far what I can say is that we are gradually narrowing down the revised zero draft, and it's taking shape quickly, but still there's more room for improvement. We can go at a faster pace than this.
More room for improvement. With the negotiations so far, do you have a sense in the room that we will have global cuts to plastic production?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very optimistic. When you look at the submissions over the period of the INCs, that's starting from INC 1 all through to INC 4, you will have in the north of 75 countries out of the 100 and almost 96 countries mentioning that we need to have global production cuts. And that's very impressive. And while the rest of them are not saying that we don't need that, it's just a handful of them, about 10 to 15 of them saying we don't need those production cuts globally. And so I think that members are gradually converging around the idea that we need to address this problem from the entire life cycle perspective. That is to say that we need to look at pollution that spans across the full life cycle, from resource extraction all the way to management, and not just make this treaty an issue that focuses solely on waste management, because clearly the waste management architecture, even globally, not just in the global south, is inadequate to take care of the current unsustainable levels of plastic waste that's being generated, which is also as a result of the unsustainable levels of production of plastics, particularly single-use plastics, problematic plastics, and avoidable plastics. And so there is a sense of convergence around the room, especially looking at countries like Rwanda, Senegal, even Ghana. We can see that there's a lot of convergence going on within the room that is speaking to cutting down the production.
I was going to ask you, what is Ghana's position in all of this?
So Ghana has taken a very strong position with respect to implementing the instrument. So at the end of 2024, that's this year, later in November, we're going to have INC 5, which is the final of the INCs. And the expectation is that we're able to get a legally binding instrument then, which will then be signed in 2025. But in order to look beyond the treaty negotiation process, you need to implement the treaty even after it's signed. So we're looking at how to finance the implementation. And one of the very innovative approaches that Ghana has proposed is the global plastic pollution fee. That is looking at targeting the primary polymer producers and levying a certain fee on them. That is to say that there is a threshold that is going to be found, that is going to be calculated by an expert body after the instrument has been adopted, say even mandated by the Conference of Parties. And when that threshold is set, that will also translate into staying within the 1.5 degrees Celsius limits of the Paris Agreement. That threshold is going to be set, and then countries are going to ensure that they keep their polymer production within that limit. Then the fee is going to be levied on countries who will then produce up or north of that limit. So if for example, and I'm speaking in very generic terms, if the threshold is say 5 tons of polymer production per year, you are at liberty to produce 5 tons. But then if you go beyond 5 tons, there's a levy that's going to be put on you, and you pay that to ensure that we're able to take care of the plastic pollution, but not only the plastic pollution that is going to be caused or the plastic waste that's going to be generated after the instrument, but all the ones that are already in the system that we are taking care of, the legacy plastic, so to speak. And so that's one very innovative approach that Ghana has taken during the negotiation.
Jacob, thank you so much for your time. And Jacob Johnson Atatba, his project manager, Zero Waste Cities, Green Africa Youth Organization.